With the Alabama Crimson Tide A-Day behind us, we have got a lot we need to talk about because there were a lot of intriguing things that I saw out there. But before we break it all down, as always, y'all know the drill. I want to hear from y'all. Hop down to the comments, give me a Y for yes or an N for no. Based off of what you saw today, are you excited for the Alabama Crimson Tide going into next season? And who stood out for you? And if you're new to the channel, be sure to subscribe, hit that bell notification because I do constant college football content. I'm actually on my push to 5,000 subscribers in my first year, and we're only 11 away from 4,000, and I would love to have you be a part of that milestone. And if you enjoyed the content, be sure to like, comment down below because those interactions are huge for content creators such as myself. But with all of that being said, we have got to talk about A-Day. And first and foremost, we'll start with the offensive unit because the offensive unit is the side from which the Alabama Crimson Tide lost a ton of production. But even throughout all of that production lost, this Alabama Crimson Tide offense, I think, has the ability to be very, very good. And we'll start with the offensive line because that's the unit with the most uncertainty right now. Look, and I think we need to be very honest in our conversation about the offensive line. This is a unit where we knew we had some people not available to go coming into A-Day, coming into the spring, and those guys that weren't able to go for the Alabama Crimson Tide are presumptive starters. So when you have presumptive starters not able to go, and then you have to replace so much talent to the NFL draft, you mix those two together, plus guys missing on actual A-Day, and then you look across the line of scrimmage and you have all those dudes across from you, you're going to have a rough day. But even throughout that rough day, the Alabama Crimson Tide offense was able to get things going, specifically for Bryce Young to the tune of 300 plus yards, 120 plus rating, and a touchdown. And his ability to navigate the pocket was unbelievable. But it is because of that right there, I think we can say any question about a quarterback competition is officially put to bed. And look, this is something I've talked about before, that if there was a quarterback competition at the University of Alabama, it would be one in name and spirit only. That I thought that the job was Bryce's, and that the only thing we would have as a competition was just kind of the natural competition at every position at Alabama, where you have an opportunity every day to prove you should be the guy. But I think at the end of A-Day, going into next season, when you have an offensive line that has some uncertainty to it, Bryce's ability to escape, navigate the pocket with his eyes remaining downfield, and not just remaining downfield, but his ability to keep his eyes downfield, navigate an unsure pocket while also going through progressions was elite. That's not something you see from sophomore quarterbacks. That's not something you see from quarterbacks that have as little experience in college as Bryce has, and that right there is exactly why you can hear why Nick Saban and so many people are so excited about Bryce Young. But the excitement doesn't end there. The tight ends where everything is promised. That tight end connection to Bryce Young, Cameron Latou for the touchdown was a phenomenal throw. Bryce stepping up in the pocket, throwing an absolute dart. The wide receiver position has got a lot of dudes on it. Trayshawn Holden had himself a day, 80 yards. He was a guy I talked about that I thought a lot of people were kind of sleeping on. He's someone who has an incredible amount of talent that we really need to watch because he's going to be a productive member of this wide receiving core. Outside of Trayshawn Holden, I think the name that we have got to talk about is Ajayi Hall had a coming out party today. My goodness gracious, 6'3", 210 pounds. And there really wasn't anything that he didn't show proficiency in today. Whether it was a yards after the catch scenario, kind of a quick slant, watching him work afterwards where he delivered a brutal stiff arm to Daniel Wright and just kept going, or whether it was him high pointing the football, he showed incredible poise for a freshman. And he's someone who I've talked about on this channel that I've heard rumblings behind the scenes that this guy could be really, really good. And we saw that today. The only thing you can say that he did negative or that he needs to work on coming out of A-Day was just how he understands his releases, which is something completely normal for a guy who is not even 2 months in or 3 months into a practice with a new offensive coordinator and an entirely new environment, And what I mean when I talk about his releases, 2 of the targets that he had that went as incompletions, he actually caught, but he caught them out of bounds. And the reason that he was out of bounds in those scenarios was instead of releasing to the inside to give himself more room to work back to the outside in the natural progression of his route, in that scenario, when a wide receiver releases to the inside when they're going to work back out, it not only gives them more room to separate from the defensive back by bowing in and coming out, it also gives the quarterback much more real estate to work with. Instead, Hall released to the outside, instantly pinning himself against the sideline. In that scenario, the defensive back only has to worry about maybe 2 yards of room, where if you go to the inside, he might have to worry about 10 yards of room. That difference in separation space is huge, but that's something that every coach in America, if they had a guy as talented as Ajayi Hall that can do what he does, and they look at the end of a scrimmage like Alabama just had, and they say that's the only thing we need to coach him up on, they are taking that 10 times out of 10. That's why he was so impressive to me. He's a guy that we are going to be just looking forward to hearing more about in fall camp. I can't wait to see what he looks like when he comes back to Tuscaloosa. Really, really impressive. But he wasn't the only one. Tyu Jones-Bell was very impressive in his yards after catch. Another guy I've talked about on the channel. I thought he had a good day. Trayshawn Holden we've talked about, but the running backs were a unit that I think a lot of people expected to have a bigger day, but we need to understand the same conversation when I talked about the Bryce Young quarterback ordeal between him and Paul Tyson. The fact that the offensive line is makeshift, has guys that are presumptive starters out, and even if those presumptive starters were there is a lot of new faces on that offensive line going against an incredibly, insanely talented defensive front. That is the recipe for disaster, especially this early into spring. Now you take even more guys away? Oh man. The running backs did a good job in their ability to understand everything when it wasn't their time to have the ball in their hand. I thought that the running backs looked good out the backfield. Sure, that will continue to progress, but you can only talk about what happened today, and I thought Roydell Williams, McClellan, anytime they got the ball out the backfield, were very good in their ability to make the first guy miss and make a positive play. So the Alabama Crimson Tide running back room is still, in my opinion, one of the most sure things in this entire roster, and something that we look really forward to seeing more of. The tight ends were absolutely as advertised, incredible. But really, my main takeaways from offense, the things that really impressed me. Bryce Young is the real deal. His ability to throw from an unstable platform while maneuvering the pocket, keeping his eyes downfield, and making progression reads while navigating an unsure pocket was awesome. The wide receivers, talented, a lot of work to be done there as far as getting guys along, but guys such as Ja'Cory Brooks, Christian Leary weren't able to go today, so there are still some really talented guys that we didn't get to see. And finally, on the offensive side, before we head over to the defensive side, the tight ends are everything that were promised. Jaleel Billingsley, I think, will be lined up in more of a receiver's capacity this year, and he is going to be huge for this Alabama offense. I think we're going to see 2 tight end sets, and it was also cool we got to see some RPO action out there as well. Moving over to the defensive side of the ball, before we go any further, I think we need to talk about this linebacking core, because both Moody and Lawson were really, really impressive. With Christian Harris not able to go, you hardly noticed his absence. Lawson was really, really impressive. Their ability to understand where to be at the time was very, very good to see. It means Alabama has meaningful depth at the middle linebacker position, a position where we've questioned before, but question no more. Moody, very good. Lawson, very good. And look, sure, we heard times where Saban was getting after them, but when you have a new guy in Lawson and a guy still learning in Moody, it's only natural that they're going to get coached up. I would have been blown away if we didn't hear them getting coached up at all, especially when it comes to the Alabama Crimson Tide system and how the linebackers have to man that system. So, first thing I noticed, the middle linebackers I was very impressed with, especially Lawson, because I expected to be impressed with Moody. I thought he'd come in and have a big day. But Lawson came in there and didn't miss a beat. Really good to see. The defensive front is as talented as we thought it was, even with no Will Anderson. And a name I think we need to talk about, because we didn't get to see Drew Sanders either, Chris Braswell is here, and he is here with a vengeance. My goodness gracious. He beat some tackles today with a variety of moves, and not the second string tackles. I'm talking the first string guys. He beat them with a variety of moves. The strip sack was a incredible speed rush where he just overpowered the the outside shoulder, got right in up under him, and it was game over. Then he was able to affect the play again later by just straight up overpowering a guy. Chris Braswell is someone who is incredibly talented, and it only adds into what I was saying the other day that the Alabama Crimson Tide D-end and outside linebacker group might be the most talented group in all of college football, and Dallas Turner isn't even on campus yet, and they're still after JT Tuimoloau. This group is incredibly fun, incredibly exciting. That group was still that exciting and explosive today in Chris Braswell when there was no Will Anderson Jr. Crimson Tide fans have got to be incredibly excited about the defensive ends. The defensive line is exactly what we thought it was, and the cornerback play is really good. I was really impressed. Jalen Armour-Davis did a great job. Helms was a guy who was out there hitting. He was not shying away from contact. He was letting everybody know that he came to play. But I think someone who really impressed me on the defense was Kool-Aid McKinstry, because anytime they threw it at him, he stood his ground, getting an interception in which he read the high-low concept beautifully and was there to snuff out either of them. One of them was going to be an interception, and the other one was going to be a no-gain type situation. He was incredibly impressive. Whether it was his poise, his ability to play man coverage, to play off coverage, to understand where he needed to be was very cool. And I think that my favorite part of A-Day ultimately came down to when we got to see him go up against Ajayi Hall and see them battle it out, because that right there is the epitome of what Nick Saban was talking about in that leaked call. Alabama is a situation where iron sharpens iron. You don't think McKinstry's not going to become much better because he's going up against a 6'3", 210-pound receiver that Nick Saban said might be one of the most explosive players on the Alabama Crimson Tide? First and foremost, opposing defenses, watch out. When you saw Bryce Young today, and then you saw that, good luck. This Alabama Crimson Tide offense looks to be very good. But then you see McKinstry, a freshman who looked incredible, getting the interception, getting a very important pass breakup later into the game, into the fourth. He was really good. He is very cool. He's got great length, and one of the most impressive plays from him today came on a ball in which he was actually kind of beat. Xavier Williams got behind him a little bit, and he actually passed Xavier before the ball ever hit the ground, outrunning him. He is the real deal. The Alabama Crimson Tide defense looks phenomenal. Whether it be the defensive line, the linebackers, I cannot say enough how impressed I was with the linebackers today, especially with a lot of people not being able to be there. When I looked up, Lawson and Moody weren't far behind where they needed to be, with such limited variation of experience between both of them. Very excited for the prospect of this Alabama Crimson Tide defense, this offense, and when it ultimately came to the conclusion of A-Day and Bryce Young was named MVP, it was absolutely deserving. This guy is the real deal. And so my guys coming out of A-Day that I was incredibly impressed with, first and foremost, the MVP, Bryce Young. His ability to navigate the pocket is rare. Ajayi Hall had a coming out party today. Chris Braswell, unbelievable coming off the edge, beating guys in a variety of ways. Kool-Aid McKinstry, whenever he was called upon, he showed up, and he didn't get tested much for a reason. And finally, both the middle linebackers from the first team, because the fact that they were able to come in there and perform the way that they were was really impressive, and it's indicative of something that I have talked about on this channel. What impressed me with Moody coming into that Arkansas game, he was worried about his job and his job only. And Saban has preached this. When you're worried about your job and you get done your job, it allows everybody else's job to become a little bit easier because now they don't have to worry about yours. That was really what I felt when I watched those two middle linebackers play. And it gave me a lot of hope because Shane Lee, a guy that didn't get to play today, Christian Harris didn't get to play today, that Alabama middle linebacker room is unbelievably stacked, along with the outside linebacker room, the running back room, the wide receiver room, the offensive line, the defensive line, and the defensive backs. But I cannot wait to hear what y'all are thinking. Hop down to the comments. Let me know what you saw, who impressed you today, and what you're thinking, and are you excited going into next season? That's it. See ya.